The morning air carried a crisp September chill as Arya Chen stood at the imposing wrought-iron gates of Westfield Preparatory Academy. The 17-year-old drew in a deep breath, cataloguing the scents that would become familiar markers in her new environment. Freshly cut grass from the immaculate lawns, the faint smell of expensive leather from passing luxury cars dropping off students, and beneath it all, the subtle undertone of old money and privilege that seemed to permeate the very stones of the century-old institution. Her father's hand rested briefly on her shoulder, a gesture of support that spoke volumes without words. Lieutenant Colonel James Chen had driven his daughter here himself, despite his busy schedule at the military base 40 miles away. The decision to transfer Arya from Lincoln High hadn't been easy, but the opportunity for a superior education at one of the state's most prestigious preparatory schools had been impossible to ignore, especially with the full scholarship she had earned through her exceptional academic performance. "Remember what Master Kim taught you," her father said quietly, his voice carrying the same steady confidence that had guided her through the darkest period of her life 7 years ago. "Not just the physical techniques, but the mental discipline. This place will test you in ways that have nothing to do with academics." Arya nodded, her fingers adjusting their grip on the white cane that had become an extension of her body over the years. The smooth aluminum felt cool against her palm, its rubber tip poised to map out the territory ahead. "I know, Dad. I'm ready." The rhythmic tap of her cane began its steady beat as she made her way through the gates and onto the main pathway. Each strike against the polished marble walkway sent vibrations up through the handle, painting a picture in her mind of the surface beneath her feet. The sound echoed off the buildings on either side, creating an acoustic map that told her about distances, materials, and open spaces. Years of practice had taught her to interpret these echoes with remarkable precision. Students were already gathering in small clusters along the pathway, their conversations creating a complex tapestry of sound that Arya's trained ears automatically began to decode. She could distinguish the confident tones of those who belonged here from birth, the slightly nervous pitch of other new students, and the particular cadence of gossip that seemed universal to all high schools, regardless of their prestige. "Is that the new girl?" she heard someone whisper from approximately 15 feet to her left. The voice belonged to a female student, probably 16 or 17, based on its timbre, wearing what sounded like designer heels that clicked distinctively against the marble. "The blind one from the public school," another voice responded, this one male trying to sound knowledgeable. "I heard she got a full academic scholarship. My mom's on the board, and she said her test scores were incredible." Arya kept her expression neutral as she continued forward, though she filed away every piece of information. She had learned long ago that people revealed far more when they thought you couldn't hear or understand them. It was one of the few advantages of being underestimated. The main building loomed ahead, its presence announced by the way sound behaved differently in its shadow. The massive oak doors were propped open, and the stream of students flowing in and out created subtle air currents that brushed against her exposed skin. She paused for a moment, allowing her other senses to gather information about this new environment. Inside, the temperature dropped several degrees, and the acoustics changed dramatically. The high ceilings created a natural amplification that made every footstep and whispered conversation reverberate through the space. The smell of old wood polish mixed with fresh flowers. Probably an expensive arrangement in the main foyer, she guessed. Beneath it all was the distinctive scent of aged paper and leather bindings that suggested a substantial library somewhere nearby. The administrative office was located down the main hallway and to the right, according to the mental map she had constructed from the school's website and the detailed description her orientation coordinator had provided. She navigated toward it with confidence, her cane sweeping in practiced arcs that detected obstacles and changes in the floor surface before she reached them. "Excuse me, do you need help finding something?" The voice came from directly ahead, belonging to someone who had deliberately stepped into her path. It was a male voice, 18 or perhaps 19 years old, with the kind of cultivated smoothness that came from expensive speech coaching and natural arrogance. Arya stopped, tilting her head slightly to better locate the speaker. He was tall, she could tell from the angle of his voice, and wearing cologne that probably cost more than most people's entire wardrobe. The particular blend of sandalwood and bergamot would become significant later, though she didn't know it yet. "Thank you, but I'm fine," she replied politely, attempting to step around him. He moved with her, maintaining his position as an obstacle. "I'm Marcus Sterling," he said, as if the name should mean something to her. When she didn't respond with appropriate awe, he continued, "Student body president, captain of the lacrosse team. My family practically built this school." "How nice for you," Arya said evenly. "Now, if you'll excuse me, I need to get to the administrative office." Marcus laughed, a sound that carried no genuine warmth. "You're going to need friends here, especially someone in your condition. Westfield isn't like whatever public school you came from. There are unwritten rules, hierarchies you need to understand." The word condition hung in the air between them like a challenge. Arya had heard it countless times before, always delivered with the same mixture of false sympathy and subtle superiority. She could have explained that blindness wasn't a condition to be pitied, but simply a different way of experiencing the world. She could have mentioned that her previous school had actually been quite challenging academically, or that she had chosen to come here for specific opportunities rather than out of desperate need. Instead, she simply smiled. "I'm sure I'll manage," she said, and this time when she moved to step around him, she did so with a subtle shift in her body language that Master Kim would have recognized as a ready stance. Marcus, oblivious to the warning, let her pass, though she could feel his eyes following her progress down the hallway. The administrative office smelled of coffee and photocopier toner. A woman with a warm voice and what sounded like a genuine smile greeted her immediately. "You must be Arya Chen. I'm Mrs. Patterson, the academic coordinator. We're so excited to have you joining us." The registration process was efficient and well organized. Mrs. Patterson had clearly done her homework, having already arranged for Arya's schedule to be provided in Braille and ensuring that all her teachers had been briefed on her needs. It was a refreshing change from the usual scramble to accommodate that Arya had experienced at other institutions. "Your first class is Advanced Placement Literature with Dr. Harrison," Mrs. Patterson explained, handing her a Braille map of the campus. "He's one of our best teachers, very old school but brilliant. The classroom is in the Whitfield building, second floor. Would you like someone to walk you there for the first few days?" "Thank you, but I prefer to learn the layout myself," Arya replied. "It helps me build a better mental map." Mrs. Patterson's approval was evident in her tone. "Of course. But please don't hesitate to ask if you need anything. We want your transition to be as smooth as possible." The Whitfield building was older than the main structure, its wooden floors creaking with age and character. Arya counted the steps to the second floor, 18, with a landing at the 9th, and noted the slightly worn spot on the banister at the turn. These small details would become landmarks in her mental navigation system. The literature classroom was already half full when she arrived. Conversations quieted as she entered, the sudden decrease in ambient noise as noticeable as a shout. She selected a seat in the second row, close enough to hear clearly, but not so front and center as to draw unnecessary attention. "Ah, our new student," came a gravelly voice from the front of the room. Dr. Harrison sounded exactly as she had imagined from Mrs. Patterson's description, elderly, erudite, and slightly intimidating. Miss Chen, I presume. I've reviewed your transcripts. Your essay on the symbolic use of darkness in Conrad's work was particularly insightful. The compliment was delivered matter-of-factly, without condescension, and Arya felt herself relax slightly. At least one teacher, it seemed, would judge her by her work rather than her disability. As other students filed in, she began building a mental roster based on voices, sense, and movement patterns. The girl who sat beside her wore vanilla perfume and typed notes on what sounded like a high-end laptop. Behind her, two boys whispered about a party the previous weekend, their voices carrying the casual entitlement of those who had never wanted for anything. The class discussion focused on Faulkner's use of stream-of-consciousness narrative, and Arya found herself drawn into the intellectual challenge. When Dr. Harrison posed a question about the reliability of narrator perspective in The Sound and the Fury, she raised her hand. The fragmentation of perspective mirrors the fragmentation of the Compson family itself, she offered. Benji's sensory-focused narrative actually provides the most honest account because it lacks the filters of rationalization that the other narrators employ. Excellent observation, Dr. Harrison responded. Would you care to elaborate on how sensory perception relates to narrative truth? It was a sophisticated question, and Arya recognized it as a test. When we rely too heavily on visual information, we often miss the subtleties that other senses provide. Benji experiences the world through smell, sound, and touch, senses that can't be as easily deceived by appearance or social construction. In that way, his narrative might be considered more authentic than his brother's, despite his cognitive limitations. The classroom was silent for a moment before Dr. Harrison responded with what sounded like approval. A unique perspective, Miss Chen. Class, take note. This is the level of analytical thinking I expect from all of you. After literature came calculus, where Arya's ability to perform complex calculations mentally impressed even the skeptical Mr. Thornton. Then chemistry, where her lab partner, a nervous sophomore named Jennifer, initially struggled with how to include her in experiments before realizing that Arya could identify chemical reactions through smell and temperature changes with remarkable accuracy. Lunch period arrived with its own set of challenges. The cafeteria was a cacophony of sound. Hundreds of conversations overlapping, the clatter of dishes and silverware, the hum of refrigeration units, and the occasional eruption of laughter or argument. Arya had to concentrate to filter through the noise and navigate the space efficiently. She had just settled at an empty table with her lunch when she sensed multiple people approaching. The particular combination of footsteps told her it was a group of 3 or 4, walking with the synchronized confidence of those used to moving through crowds that parted for them. Well, well, Marcus Sterling's voice carried clearly over the ambient noise. Our scholarship student is dining alone. That must be lonely. His companions laughed on cue. Arya recognized one voice from her literature class, Connor Blake, who had struggled to answer even basic questions about the reading. The other was unfamiliar, but the nervous quality of his laughter suggested someone trying hard to fit in with the group. I enjoy the piece, Arya replied, taking a bite of her sandwich. Marcus pulled out the chair across from her, the metal legs scraping loudly against the floor. You know, I've been thinking about what you said this morning. About managing on your own. That's admirable, really. But everyone needs help sometimes. His tone had shifted to something that might have sounded friendly to casual observers, but Arya could hear the underlying mockery. She had encountered this type before, the bully who maintained plausible deniability by couching aggression in false concern. How thoughtful, she said dryly, but I'm quite capable of asking for help when I need it. Of course you are, Marcus continued, reaching across the table. Here, let me help you with your tray. It looks like it might tip. What happened next would become the subject of intense discussion among the witnesses. Marcus's hand moved toward Arya's tray with apparent helpfulness, but his fingers caught the edge in a way that could only have been deliberate. The tray tilted, sending tomato soup cascading across the table and onto Arya's white cashmere sweater. The gasps and laughter that followed created a wave of sound that Arya had to consciously block out to maintain her composure. The soup was hot, but not scalding, and she could feel it soaking through the expensive sweater her grandmother had given her as a good luck gift for her first day. "Oh my God, I'm so clumsy!" Marcus exclaimed with theatrical dismay. "I'm so sorry. I was just trying to help steady it, but I guess I made things worse. That's what happens when you try to help someone who can't see what's coming." The double meaning in his words was clear to everyone listening. This wasn't an accident. It was a carefully orchestrated humiliation designed to establish the social hierarchy on her first day. Arya sat perfectly still for a moment, processing not just what had happened, but the best response to it. Master Kim's voice echoed in her memory. The warrior who loses control of their emotions has already lost the battle. She could feel dozens of eyes on her, waiting to see if she would cry, rage, or flee. Instead, she reached into her backpack with deliberate calm and extracted a packet of tissues. With methodical precision, she began cleaning herself, her movements controlled and dignified. The silence that fell over the surrounding tables was profound. "Accidents happen," she said finally, her voice carrying clearly through the hushed cafeteria. "Though usually they're less intentional." The directness of her response clearly caught Marcus off guard. He had expected tears, anger, or humiliation, emotions he could mock and weaponize. Her composed reaction and subtle call-out of his behavior left him momentarily speechless. "I said I was sorry," he managed, but some of the confidence had left his voice. "Yes, you did," Arya agreed, standing and gathering her ruined lunch. "Your apology was as sincere as your help. If you'll excuse me, I need to change." She navigated through the cafeteria with her head high, refusing to hurry, despite the discomfort of the wet fabric against her skin. Behind her, she could hear the eruption of whispered conversations. Some students were laughing at the spectacle, but others sounded unsettled by what they had witnessed. In the bathroom, Arya changed into the spare shirt she always carried in her backpack, a habit developed through years of experience with the occasional genuine accident. As she stuffed the ruined sweater into a plastic bag, she heard the door open and footsteps approach. "That was really messed up," a female voice said. The speaker had a slight accent, Latino, Arya thought, and sounded genuinely angry. "Marcus is such a jerk. I'm Elena Rodriguez, by the way. I'm in your lit class." "Arya," she replied, though Elena obviously already knew who she was. "You handled that like a boss," Elena continued. "Most people would have given him the reaction he wanted. But you just didn't. It was actually kind of amazing. Getting angry would have just given him more ammunition," Arya explained, adjusting her fresh shirt. "People like Marcus feed on emotional reactions. Deny them that, and they don't know what to do." Elena laughed, a genuine sound that was refreshing after the mockery in the cafeteria. "You've dealt with bullies before." "Once or twice," Arya admitted with a slight smile. "Well, just so you know, not everyone here is like Marcus and his crew. Some of us actually have functioning consciences." The afternoon classes passed without major incident, though Arya was aware of the whispers that followed her through the hallways. The soup incident had already become part of the school's social mythology, growing and changing with each retelling. In her last period class, AP Physics, she found herself seated next to a quiet student who introduced himself as David Park. Unlike the cautious courtesy or false friendliness she had encountered from most others, David's manner was straightforward and practical. "I heard about lunch," he said simply. "Marcus has been pulling stunts like that since middle school. The administration never does anything because his family donates too much money." "Charming," Arya replied, arranging her braille notes on the desk. "I'm good with technology," David continued. "If you need any adaptive software or help with digital resources, let me know. I've already written a few programs for students with different learning needs." The offer was made without fanfare or any expectation of gratitude, and Arya found herself genuinely appreciating the gesture. "Thank you. That might actually be helpful." As the physics teacher began explaining the semester's curriculum, Arya allowed part of her mind to assess her first day at Westfield. The academic challenges were manageable, even exciting. Several teachers seemed genuinely interested in her success. She had potentially found at least 2 allies in Elena and David. But Marcus Sterling was going to be a problem. What her classmates didn't know, what she had carefully kept hidden for years, was that Arya was far from the helpless target Marcus assumed her to be. The story began 7 years ago, when the doctors at Children's Hospital had delivered the devastating diagnosis. Leber's hereditary optic neuropathy, they called it. A rare genetic condition that would gradually steal her sight until darkness was all that remained. She had been 10 years old, a bright child who loved to read, draw, and watch her father practice martial arts in their garage. The diagnosis had felt like a death sentence, not of her body, but of everything she had imagined her future would hold. For months after her vision finally faded completely, she had retreated into herself, afraid to move through a world that had become alien and threatening. It was her father who had refused to let her surrender to despair. Lieutenant Colonel James Chen had seen too much in his military career to believe that physical limitations defined a person's potential. He had researched extensively, consulted experts, and finally found Master Kim. Kim Sung-ho was not what anyone expected from a martial arts instructor. In his 70s, the Korean War veteran had lost his own sight to a grenade explosion decades earlier. Instead of ending his practice, blindness had transformed it. He had developed a unique system that relied entirely on non-visual senses, turning what many saw as a disability into a different kind of ability. "Your eyes were always your weakness," he had told Arya during their first meeting. "They made you lazy. You trusted them too much and ignored the wealth of information your other senses provide. Now, we will teach you to truly perceive." The training had been brutal. Hours of stance work, learning to feel the subtle shifts in balance that preceded movement. Endless repetitions of forms, each motion precisely calibrated to maximum efficiency. Sparring sessions where she had to track opponents through sound, smell, and the subtle displacement of air around moving bodies. Master Kim had been relentless, but never cruel. Each failure was a lesson, each success a step towards something greater than mere self-defense. He taught her to read the micro-expressions in people's breathing, to sense aggressive intent in the tension of nearby muscles, to navigate spaces by the way sound bounced off surfaces. "Combat is merely one application," he would say. "The true art is in understanding yourself, your environment, your opponent. When you can do this without sight, you see more clearly than those who rely on their eyes." The physical techniques had come slowly at first. Arya had struggled with basic blocks and strikes, her body uncertain in the darkness that had become her permanent reality. But gradually, incrementally, she had improved. Her hearing sharpened to the point where she could identify people by their footsteps from 50 feet away. Her sense of smell became so acute that she could detect emotional states through the subtle changes in body chemistry that accompanied fear, anger, or excitement. After 3 years of training, she had earned her black belt in Taekwondo. Master Kim had then introduced her to other disciplines: the flowing redirections of Aikido, the close-quarters efficiency of Jiu-Jitsu, the pressure point precision of Dim Mak. Each art added layers to her capability, creating a synthesis uniquely adapted to her way of perceiving the world. But the most valuable lessons had been mental and philosophical. Master Kim taught her about patience, about choosing battles, about the strength found in appearing weak when you were actually strong. The greatest victory, he would say, is the battle that never needs to be fought. But when fighting becomes necessary, end it quickly and decisively. By the time she was 15, Arya could spar with sighted opponents and win consistently. Her style was unlike anything they had encountered. She seemed to know where attacks would come from before they were launched, flowed around strikes like water, and counterattacked with uncanny precision. Some students at Master Kim's dojo whispered that she had developed something supernatural, but the truth was both simpler and more complex. She had learned to use her remaining senses so efficiently that she perceived things others missed entirely. The decision to hide these abilities at school had been deliberate and strategic. Being blind already made her different. Being a blind martial artist would have made her a curiosity, a novelty to be gawked at and tested. She had seen how people reacted to difference, how they either pitied or challenged it. Better to be underestimated, to move through the world with her capabilities hidden until they were needed. Now, as she sat in physics class at Westfield Prep, Arya wondered if that need would arise sooner than she had hoped. Marcus Sterling's behavior at lunch suggested this was just the beginning of a campaign of harassment. She had dealt with bullies before, but never once with such institutional protection and resources. After school, Arya waited outside for her father to pick her up. The September afternoon had grown warm, and she could smell the freshly cut grass from the sports fields where various teams were practicing. The lacrosse team was on the main field, their shouts and the crack of sticks against balls creating a rhythmic pattern of controlled violence. Enjoying the show? Marcus's voice came from her left, closer than she had expected. He had approached downwind, and the noise from the practice had masked his footsteps. Clever, if intentional. "Just waiting for my ride," she replied neutrally. "You know, I felt bad about lunch," he said, though his tone suggested otherwise. "It really was an accident. But hey, these things happen when you're navigating unfamiliar territory." The metaphor wasn't subtle. "I'm getting familiar with the territory pretty quickly," Arya responded. "Including the hazards." Marcus laughed. "Hazards? I like that. You're interesting, Chen. Most scholarship kids try to fly under the radar, but you've got some spine." "Is that a problem?" "Not at all. It makes things more entertaining." He moved closer, and she could smell the sweat from his practice mixed with that expensive cologne. "But spine only gets you so far at Westfield. This place has ways of breaking people who don't fit in." Before Arya could respond, her father's car pulled up to the curb. She stood, unfolding her cane with practiced efficiency. "I don't break easily," she said simply, then made her way to the vehicle. As they drove away, her father asked, "Trouble already?" "Nothing I can't handle," Arya replied, though she could feel his skepticism in the pause that followed. "You could report it," he suggested. "Based on what? An accident at lunch? A vaguely threatening conversation?" "No, Dad. I need to establish myself on my own terms. Running to the administration on day one would mark me as weak." Lieutenant Colonel Chen sighed. "Sometimes I wonder if teaching you strategy along with self-defense was a mistake. You taught me to win," Arya reminded him. "Sometimes that means choosing when and how to fight." That evening, Arya's family gathered for dinner in their modest dining room. Her mother, Dr. Lisa Chen, had prepared Arya's favorite meal to celebrate surviving the first day at her new school. Her younger brother, Michael, peppered her with questions about Westfield, fascinated by his sister's descriptions of the opulent campus. "Did you make any friends?" her mother asked, the concern in her voice carefully controlled. A couple of potential allies, Arya replied. There's a girl named Elena who seems genuinely nice, and a boy named David who offered to help with technology adaptations. And enemies? Her father asked, cutting straight to the point. One definite antagonist and his followers. Nothing I haven't dealt with before. Michael, only 12 but perceptive beyond his years, frowned. Are they giving you trouble because you're blind? Partly, Arya admitted, but also because I'm new, because I'm on scholarship, and because I didn't immediately defer to their perceived authority. Jerks, Michael muttered, earning a mild rebuke from their mother about language. After dinner, Arya retreated to her room to complete homework. Her computer, equipped with screen-reading software and a braille display, allowed her to research and write as efficiently as any sighted student. She lost herself in an essay about economic disparities in post-Civil War reconstruction, finding comfort in the intellectual challenge. Around 10 o'clock, her phone buzzed with a text message. The synthetic voice of her screen reader announced, "Unknown number." Message reads, "Hey, it's Elena from Lit class. Got your number from the student directory. Hope that's okay. Just wanted to check that you're doing all right after today." Arya smiled and dictated a response. "I'm fine, thanks. The sweater was a casualty, but I'll survive." Elena's reply came quickly. "Marcus is such trash. But seriously, you handled it like a champion. Most people would have been destroyed. Where did you learn to be so calm under pressure?" Arya considered how to respond. "Life teaches you things if you pay attention," she finally sent. Over the following days, a pattern emerged at Westfield. Marcus and his core group, Connor Blake and Tyler Morrison, maintained a campaign of low-level harassment. Chairs would mysteriously appear in her path. Whispered comments would follow her through hallways. Her locker would occasionally be blocked by accidentally placed equipment or bags. Each incident was carefully calibrated to appear accidental or minor enough to avoid official intervention. Marcus was smart enough not to repeat anything as blatant as the soup incident, instead opting for a death-by-1,000 cuts approach designed to wear down her resolve. But Arya had endured far worse during her early days of blindness, when every journey outside her home had been a terrifying adventure in a suddenly hostile world. These petty harassments were almost laughably simple compared to learning to navigate busy streets, crowded stores, and public transportation without sight. She developed countermeasures. Her hearing was acute enough to detect when someone was attempting to place an obstacle in her path, and she would simply adjust her route without comment. When Connor tried to confuse her by giving false directions to a classroom, she thanked him politely and went the correct way anyway, having already memorized the building layouts. Tyler's attempts were often the clumsiest. He would speak in exaggerated whispers, apparently believing that if he was quiet enough, she wouldn't hear him mocking her. Arya would sometimes repeat his words back to him verbatim, causing him to flush with embarrassment and stammer denials. Elena became a regular lunch companion, her fierce loyalty and quick wit providing both protection and entertainment. She had a talent for devastating verbal comebacks that left Marcus's crew speechless. David often joined them, his quiet presence and analytical observations adding another layer to their developing friendship. "I've been documenting everything," David mentioned one day, his voice low to avoid being overheard. "Videos, audio recordings, timestamps, building a case just in case it's needed." "You're recording them?" Eleanor asked, impressed. "My phone is always recording when they're around," David explained. "One-party consent state, perfectly legal. I've got hours of Marcus being a complete ass." Arya appreciated the support, but remained committed to handling the situation her own way. "Save it," she told David, "but let's hope we don't need it." In classes, Arya excelled. Her literature essays earned consistent praise from Dr. Harrison, who began using them as examples for the class. In calculus, she solved complex problems in her head faster than most students could work them out on paper. Her chemistry lab reports were meticulous, and her physics understanding was intuitive and sophisticated. The academic success seemed to frustrate Marcus more than her resilience to his harassment. He was used to being the apex predator at Westfield, his combination of wealth, looks, and athletic ability placing him at the pinnacle of the social hierarchy. That a blind scholarship student was outperforming him academically was an intolerable blow to his ego. The situation escalated during the third week of school. Aria was walking to her locker between classes when she heard Marcus and Connor approaching from behind. Their footsteps had the deliberate quality of hunters stalking prey. "Hey, Chen," Marcus called out. "How do you even know which locker is yours?" They all looked the same. Aria didn't turn around. "I count," she said simply, working her combination lock. "Must be hard keeping track of so many things when you can't see," Connor added, moving closer. "Easy to get confused. Make mistakes." She felt Connor's hand brush against her backpack, a subtle attempt to unzip it. Without looking, she shifted her weight and stepped backward, her heel coming down precisely on his foot. It appeared accidental, but the placement was perfect, causing him to yelp and jump back. "Oh, I'm sorry," she said with false innocence. "Did I step on you?" It's so hard to know where people are standing when they crowd too close. Marcus's laugh had an edge to it. "Careful, Connor. Our scholarship student seems to be getting clumsy. Must be the stress of trying to keep up with Westfield's standards." "Actually," Aria said, turning to face them with her unseeing eyes hidden behind dark glasses, "my GPA is currently higher than yours, Marcus. 4.0 versus your 3.6, I believe. But don't worry, I'm sure your family's donations will help compensate for your academic shortcomings." The hallway seemed to hold its breath. Several students had stopped to watch the exchange, and Aria could feel the shift in energy as her words hit home. She had just violated one of Westfield's unspoken rules. Scholarship students didn't challenge the established elite. Marcus's voice, when he responded, was dangerously quiet. "You think you're smart, don't you? Think those grades mean something? This isn't just about academics, Chen. This is about knowing your place." "And what place would that be?" Aria asked calmly. "Beneath me," Marcus said, the words carrying layers of meaning. "I'll pass," Aria replied, closing her locker and walking away. Behind her, she heard Connor ask, "Are you going to let her talk to you like that?" Marcus's response was too quiet for most to hear, but Aria's trained ears caught it clearly. She'll learn. They always do. That afternoon, Master Kim noticed Aria's tension during training. The elderly master moved silently around the mat as she worked through her forms, occasionally correcting her posture with a light touch. "Your mind is elsewhere," he observed. "Your body performs the movements, but your spirit is fighting a different battle." Aria completed the form and bowed. "There's a situation at school. Someone testing boundaries." "Ah." Master Kim's voice carried understanding. "And you are deciding whether to reveal your capabilities. Revealing them would end the harassment quickly," Aria said, "but it would also change everything. I'd become a spectacle, a curiosity, the blind girl who knows martial arts. That's all anyone would see. And now they see only the blindness? Some do. Others are beginning to see more. I've made friends who value me for my mind, my personality. If I suddenly demonstrate that I could physically dominate the person harassing me, would those friendships change? Would they see me differently?" Master Kim was quiet for a moment. "What does your instinct tell you?" "To wait." to let him escalate until he crosses a line that justifies a response. But waiting means enduring more harassment, possibly putting myself at risk. Risk exists in both action and inaction, Master Kim said. But consider this. Your tormentor believes he understands power because he has always held it. He sees your blindness as weakness because he cannot imagine strength without sight. When you do act, if you must act, his worldview will shatter. That moment of realization can be more devastating than any physical defeat. You're saying to let him dig his own grave? I'm saying that true victory often comes not from demonstrating superiority, but from allowing opponents to reveal their own inferiority. Your strength is not just in your fists or your techniques, it's in your patience, your intelligence, your refusal to be what he expects. That is already defeating him, even if he doesn't know it yet. The conversation with Master Kim provided clarity, reinforcing Arya's decision to maintain her current strategy. She would endure, document, and wait for the right moment, if it came at all. The next few weeks passed in a tense equilibrium. Marcus's harassment continued, but didn't escalate beyond the psychological warfare he had already employed. Arya suspected he was also waiting, looking for a weakness or an opportunity to deliver a more decisive blow to her growing reputation. Meanwhile, her friendship with Elena and David deepened. Elena introduced her to other students who existed outside Marcus's sphere of influence: theater kids, debate team members, and various academic overachievers who valued intelligence over social status. David's documentation project had evolved into something more sophisticated, including timestamp logs and behavioral pattern analysis that would have impressed professional investigators. "You know he's planning something," Elena said one lunch period, her voice tight with concern. "Whenever Marcus gets quiet like this, it means he's scheming." "Let him scheme," Arya replied. "I'm not going anywhere." But Elena was right. Marcus had been planning, and his scheme revealed itself during the announcement of the upcoming school field trip to Pine Ridge Nature Preserve. The 3-day, 2-night camping excursion was a Westfield tradition, designed to build character and class bonding through outdoor activities and challenges. For most students, it was a welcome break from academic pressure. For Arya, it represented a new set of challenges. Navigating natural terrain was different from the predictable surfaces of school hallways. The acoustic properties of open forests varied dramatically from enclosed spaces, and being away from familiar territory with Marcus and his crew presented obvious risks. "You could skip it," David suggested. "Get a medical excuse or something." "Absolutely not," Arya said firmly. "That would be admitting defeat. Besides, I've been camping before. The outdoors doesn't scare me." What she didn't mention was that Master Kim had specifically trained her in natural environments. He believed that nature was the ultimate teacher, forcing adaptation and heightening awareness in ways that controlled dojo settings never could. She had spent countless hours learning to navigate forests, tracking movement through disturbed vegetation, and using natural sounds to map her surroundings. The morning of the field trip arrived grey and misty. Parents dropped their children off at the school parking lot, where 3 large buses waited to transport them to Pine Ridge. Arya could hear the excitement and nervousness in her classmates' voices as they loaded sleeping bags and backpacks into the storage compartments. Elena had positioned herself as Arya's unofficial guardian, helping describe visual elements that might be relevant while being careful not to be overbearing. "Marcus and his goons are on bus 2, she reported. "We should take bus 1 or 3. They ended up on bus 3 with David and a collection of other students who seemed relieved to be away from Marcus's sphere of influence. The 2-hour drive passed pleasantly enough, with Elena describing the scenery they passed and David explaining the technical specifications of the GPS tracking devices they'd all been given for safety. Pine Ridge Nature Preserve sprawled across 500 acres of pristine wilderness. The main camp consisted of a large lodge surrounded by small cabins that would house the students. The air smelled of pine sap and damp earth, with an undercurrent of wood smoke from the lodge's fireplace. Mr. Thompson, the outdoor education coordinator, gathered everyone for orientation. His booming voice carried easily across the assembly area as he explained the rules, safety procedures, and planned activities. Arya listened carefully, building a mental map of the camp layout from his descriptions. "Cabin assignments have been posted on the main board," Mr. Thompson announced. "Find your bunk, store your gear, and report back here in 30 minutes for the first activity." The cabins were basic but comfortable, with 4 bunk beds and a small bathroom. Arya found herself assigned with Elena and 2 other girls she didn't know well. Jennifer from her chemistry class, and a quiet sophomore named Sarah. They were friendly enough, though Arya could sense their uncertainty about how to act around her. The first day's activities were relatively tame: nature walks, plant identification, and team-building exercises. Arya participated fully, using her cane to navigate the trails and surprising several classmates with her ability to identify birds by their calls and plants by their scents. During the evening campfire, ghost stories were told and marshmallows roasted. Arya sat with Elena and David, enjoying the warmth of the fire and the temporary peace. Marcus had been surprisingly subdued all day, participating in activities without his usual swagger or targeted comments. "It's weird," Elena whispered. "He's being almost normal." "Don't trust it," David advised. "He's up to something." His suspicion proved correct on the second night. Arya had left the cabin to use the bathroom, taking the familiar path she had memorized during daylight hours. The moon was new, leaving the forest in almost complete darkness. Not that it mattered to her. She was returning to the cabin when she heard footsteps behind her. 3 sets trying to move quietly, but failing to mask the crunch of leaves and snap of twigs beneath their feet. They were following her, maintaining a distance of about 20 feet. Arya continued walking normally, giving no indication that she had detected them. Her other senses went on high alert, cataloging information. 3 males, one wearing too much cologne, Marcus. The other 2 were likely Connor and Tyler based on their gait patterns. They were moving to surround her, 2 spreading out to the sides, while Marcus stayed behind. She reached a small clearing she had noted earlier, about 50 yards from the nearest cabin. This was where they planned to confront her, she realized. Far enough from camp that sounds wouldn't carry easily, but not so far that her absence would be immediately noticed. "Lost, Chen." Marcus's voice came from directly behind her as his companions completed their flanking maneuver. Arya stopped, turning slowly to face the direction of his voice. "Not at all." "Are you?" They were wearing something over their faces. Ski masks from the smell of the wool, a pathetic attempt at disguise considering she had already identified them. "Hand over your phone and money," Connor said, attempting to disguise his voice with a rough growl. The demand was so absurd that Arya almost laughed. This wasn't a real robbery. It was a hazing ritual designed to humiliate and terrify her. They expected her to panic, to cry, to beg for help that wouldn't come. "I don't carry much cash," she said conversationally, "and my phone has accessibility features that make it pretty useless to anyone else." Tyler moved closer from her left, his breathing quickened with nervous excitement. "Just hand them over," he said, forgetting to disguise his voice. "Tyler, you really should work on your acting," Arya observed. "And Marcus, that cologne is quite distinctive. $20 says it's the limited edition Tom Ford you were bragging about last week." The silence that followed was heavy with shock. She had identified them immediately, destroying their plan before it could properly begin. "You think you're so smart," Marcus snarled, abandoning all pretense. "Let's see how smart you are when—" He lunged forward, intending to grab her arm. The movement was telegraphed in his breathing, the shift of his weight, the displacement of air. Arya had a dozen ways to respond, each one capable of ending this confrontation decisively. Time seemed to slow as her training took over. She could break his wrist with a simple redirection. She could strike pressure points that would leave him gasping on the ground. She could demonstrate exactly how dangerous underestimating her could be. Instead, she chose something more elegant. Arya stepped smoothly to the side, using Marcus's momentum against him. Her hand found his wrist with uncanny precision, guiding it past her while her foot positioned itself exactly where his next step would fall. The result was inevitable. Marcus tumbled forward, crashing face first into the leaf-covered ground with a startled yelp. Connor rushed in from the right, but Arya had already mapped his approach. She pivoted on her heel, her cane sweeping low in what appeared to be a defensive gesture, but was actually a precisely calculated strike to his shin. He stumbled, cursing, and she used his momentary imbalance to guide him into a tree with minimal force. Tyler hadn't moved, frozen by the impossible sight of his blind classmate effortlessly handling two larger attackers. "I train in self-defense," Arya said calmly, as if discussing the weather. "My father insisted after I lost my sight. Did you really think I would be helpless just because I can't see?" Marcus struggled to his feet, leaves and dirt clinging to his expensive camping gear. His humiliation was palpable, radiating from him in waves that Arya could almost taste. "This isn't over," he gasped, his voice cracking with rage and embarrassment. "Actually, it is," Arya replied, "because here's what's going to happen. You're going to leave me alone, completely. No more harassment, no more accidents, no more anything. In return, I won't report this attempted assault to Mr. Thompson and the police." "You can't prove anything," Connor protested, still rubbing his shin. "Can't I?" Arya pulled out her phone, which had been recording the entire encounter. Amazing what modern technology can do. Everything is here. Your voices, your threats, your pathetic attempt at assault. It was a bluff. While her phone had accessibility features, she hadn't been recording, but they didn't know that, and their guilty consciences filled in the gaps. "You recorded us!" Tyler's voice was high with panic. "I'm blind, not stupid," Arya said. "I've been documenting your harassment for weeks. This is just the latest addition to a very comprehensive file." She let that sink in before continuing. "So, here's the deal. You leave me alone, and this all stays between us. Continue your campaign, and I'll ensure everyone knows exactly what kind of people you really are. Your choice." Marcus's fists clenched audibly, but he was trapped and knew it. His family's influence couldn't protect him from clear evidence of assault, especially given the school's recent emphasis on anti-bullying measures. "Fine," he spat, "but don't think this makes you special. You're still just a charity case playing at being a real Westfield student. And you're still just a bully hiding behind Daddy's money," Arya replied evenly. "The difference is, I'm not ashamed of what I am." The three boys retreated back toward camp, their footsteps heavy with defeat. Arya waited until she was sure they were gone before allowing herself a small smile. She had revealed some of her capabilities, but not all. They now knew she could defend herself, but they had no idea of the true extent of her training. When she returned to her cabin, Elena was waiting anxiously. "Where were you?" "I was about to organize a search party." "Just needed some air," Arya said. "Ran into Marcus and his friends." Elena's concern immediately shifted to suspicion. And we came to an understanding. I don't think they'll be bothering me anymore." The next morning, the change was obvious. Marcus avoided her completely, not even making eye contact when they passed. Connor and Tyler seemed actively afraid of her, quickly changing direction when she approached. Other students noticed the shift, whispers spreading through the camp about what might have happened. David cornered her during breakfast. "Something went down last night," he said. It wasn't a question. "Marcus overplayed his hand," Arya replied simply. "I called his bluff." That's all you're going to tell me? For now, just know that the problem has been resolved. The rest of the field trip passed without incident. Marcus and his crew maintained their distance, and Arya was able to enjoy the outdoor activities without constant harassment. She even participated in the ropes course, navigating the obstacles through careful attention to the instructor's guidance and the tension patterns in the safety equipment. Back at school the following week, the new dynamic solidified. Marcus's influence had been subtly but significantly diminished. Students who had previously been too intimidated to challenge him began to assert themselves. His cruel comments were met with eye rolls rather than nervous laughter. His assumed authority was questioned. Elena was delighted by the change. "It's like you broke a spell," she said. "Everyone can see he's just a regular jerk now, not some untouchable king." But Arya knew the victory was temporary and limited. Marcus still had his family's wealth and connections. He still had loyal followers who benefited from his patronage. And most importantly, his humiliation would fester into something darker if not properly addressed. The opportunity for a more permanent resolution came unexpectedly through Dr. Harrison's literature class. He announced a major project that would count for a significant portion of their grade, a presentation on the theme of perception versus reality in literature. "You may work alone or in pairs," he explained. "The presentation should be 15 minutes long and demonstrate deep analytical thinking about how authors use the disconnect between appearance and truth to create meaning." Before anyone could move, Marcus stood up. "I'll work with Chen," he announced, his voice carrying a challenge. The classroom went silent. Elena looked ready to object, but Arya spoke first. "Acceptable," she said simply. Dr. Harrison raised an eyebrow but nodded. "Very well. I expect exceptional work from both of you." After class, Elena confronted her immediately. "Are you insane? Why would you agree to work with him?" "Because," Arya explained, "this is an opportunity to change the dynamic permanently. Marcus needs to see me as an equal, not just a threat. Working together on something academic might accomplish that." Their first meeting was awkward. Marcus had suggested they work in the library, choosing a table in the back where they wouldn't be observed. He sat across from her, his discomfort palpable. "So," he began stiffly, "what text do you think we should analyze?" "Invisible Man" by Ralph Ellison, Arya suggested. The entire novel is about the disconnect between how the narrator is perceived and who he actually is. Marcus was quiet for a moment. "That's a little on the nose, don't you think?" "Sometimes the obvious choice is obvious because it's the right one," Arya replied, "unless you have a better suggestion." "The Great Gatsby," he offered. "Everyone thinks Gatsby is this mysterious, powerful figure, but he's really just a desperate man chasing an impossible dream." Arya considered this. "That could work too, or we could do both. Compare how Ellison and Fitzgerald use similar themes in very different contexts." "That's actually not a bad idea," Marcus admitted, sounding surprised. They spent the next hour outlining their approach, and Arya was surprised to find that Marcus, when he wasn't performing for an audience, was actually intelligent and well-read. His insights into Gatsby's character were sophisticated, and he drew interesting parallels she hadn't considered. "You know," he said as they were packing up, "you're not what I expected." "Blind people can't be smart?" Arya asked, though her tone was more curious than confrontational. "No, not that. I don't know what I mean." He paused, seeming to struggle with his words. "I guess I expected you to be bitter or angry about your situation, but you're not. You're just normal. Better than normal, actually." "Everyone has challenges," Arya said carefully. "Mine are just more visible than most." "What's that supposed to mean?" She considered her words carefully. "You carry the weight of your family's expectations. The pressure to maintain an image, to be what everyone expects Marcus Sterling to be. That's its own kind of prison." Marcus was silent for a long moment. How did you— I pay attention, Arya interrupted, to voices, to patterns, to the things people don't say. You're not actually cruel, Marcus. You're playing a role you think you have to play. You don't know anything about me, he said, but the protest lacked conviction. I know you quote Fitzgerald perfectly from memory, which means you've read him for pleasure, not just for class. I know you tense up whenever someone mentions your father. I know you're actually interested in literature, but hide it because it doesn't fit the image. And I know that what happened at Pine Ridge scared you, not because I could defend myself, but because I saw through your mask so easily. Marcus's breathing had changed, become shallower. The others can't know, he said finally. Connor, Tyler, the rest, they can't know we're actually working together. They'll see it as weakness. Then maybe you need better friends, Arya suggested. It's not that simple. My father— He cut himself off. Forget it. Let's just focus on the project. Over the next 2 weeks, they met secretly to work on their presentation. Marcus would arrive at the library separately, always checking to make sure none of his usual crowd were around. During these sessions, Arya saw glimpses of who Marcus might have been without the pressure of his family name and social position. He was surprisingly funny when he let his guard down, with a dry wit that complemented her own. He had genuine passion for literature, but had learned to hide it after his father dismissed it as impractical. He was deeply insecure about his intelligence, constantly comparing himself to others and finding himself lacking. My father wants me to go to Harvard, he admitted during one session. Business school, then take over the family empire. He's already made the donations to ensure I get in. What do you want? Arya asked. Doesn't matter what I want, Marcus replied automatically, then seemed to catch himself. I mean, Harvard's a great opportunity. That's not what I asked. He was quiet for so long that Arya thought he wouldn't answer. Then, quietly, I want to teach. Literature, maybe. Somewhere far away from here, where the sterling name doesn't mean anything. So do it, Arya said simply. You make it sound easy. I didn't say it was easy, but living someone else's life is harder in the long run. Their presentation was scheduled for a Friday afternoon. They had rehearsed it thoroughly, with Marcus handling the visual elements while Arya provided the analytical framework. But when the day arrived, Marcus seemed nervous in a way that had nothing to do with academic performance. My father's coming, he explained tersely. He heard about the project and wants to see it. Arya understood immediately. Richard Sterling's presence would put Marcus back in his performative role, forced to maintain the image his father expected. We stick to the plan, she said firmly. We present our work as equals. That was the deal. The classroom was fuller than usual. Along with their regular classmates, several parents had come to watch the presentations. Richard Sterling sat in the back, his presence commanding attention even in silence. He was an older version of Marcus. Same sharp features, same calculated confidence, same expensive suit. When their turn came, Marcus's entire demeanor changed. The relaxed partner she had been working with disappeared, replaced by the arrogant persona she had first encountered. He introduced their topic with unnecessary grandness, subtly implying that he had done most of the work. Arya could have let it slide, could have played the supporting role he was trying to assign her. Instead, she decided to take control. Actually, she interjected smoothly, let me clarify the analytical framework we developed together. She proceeded to outline their thesis with such clarity and sophistication that the room fell completely silent. As they moved through the presentation, Arya consistently elevated the discourse, drawing connections that went beyond what they had rehearsed. She quoted passages from memory, analyzed symbolic patterns with remarkable insight, and demonstrated a command of the material that was undeniable. Marcus initially tried to keep up his pretense of superiority, But as Arya's brilliance became increasingly apparent, something shifted. She saw it in the way his breathing changed, the slight relaxation of his shoulders. He stopped trying to dominate and began actually collaborating, building on her points with genuine enthusiasm. Their presentation became a dialogue rather than a performance, with ideas flowing naturally between them. They challenged each other's interpretations, refined arguments in real time, and created something far better than what either could have achieved alone. When they finished, the applause was immediate and sustained. Dr. Harrison looked genuinely impressed, a rare occurrence for the demanding teacher. "Exceptional work," he said. "This is what true academic collaboration looks like. Two minds challenging and elevating each other. You should both be proud." As students and parents filed out, Richard Sterling approached them. Up close, Arya could smell his cologne, different from his son's, more traditional and austere. "Interesting presentation," he said, his tone giving nothing away. "I wasn't aware you were working with the scholarship student, Marcus." "Arya," Marcus said, and Arya heard something new in his voice, a quiet defiance. "Her name is Arya Chen, and she's probably the smartest person in this school." Richard Sterling's pause was loaded with unspoken communication between father and son. "I see," he said finally. "Miss Chen, you present yourself well despite your limitations." "I don't have limitations, Mr. Sterling," Arya replied calmly. "I have differences." There's a distinction. Another pause, this one longer. "Indeed. Marcus, we'll discuss this at home." After he left, Marcus slumped slightly. He's going to be furious. "Why?" Arya asked. "Because I defended you. Because I admitted you're smarter than me. Because I showed weakness." The last word was bitter. "You showed strength," Arya corrected. "It takes strength to acknowledge others' abilities. It takes strength to change. Your father will understand that eventually, or he won't. Either way, you have to decide who you want to be." The following Monday, the social dynamics at Westfield had shifted dramatically. News of Marcus and Arya's presentation had spread, along with reports that Marcus had publicly acknowledged her intelligence. His usual crew seemed confused and somewhat lost without their leader's typical behavior to follow. Connor approached Arya during lunch, looking uncomfortable. "Is it true," he asked, "about you and Marcus working together?" "We did a project together, yes," Arya confirmed. "He said you're friends now." Arya considered this. "I wouldn't go that far, but we're not enemies anymore." Connor shifted nervously. "I wanted to apologize. For everything. The Pine Ridge thing, the harassment, all of it. It was wrong." "Yes, it was," Arya agreed. "But apologizing is a good first step." Tyler offered his own awkward apology later that day, and while Arya accepted both, she maintained appropriate skepticism. Change was a process, not a moment, and she would judge them by their future actions rather than their words. The most significant change came from Marcus himself. He no longer held court in the hallways or demanded deference from other students. He began participating genuinely in classes rather than coasting on his family name. He even started eating lunch with different groups, exploring friendships beyond his usual circle. "It's weird," Elena observed. "It's like he's becoming an actual person instead of a caricature." "People are capable of growth," Arya replied. "Sometimes they just need permission to change." As the semester progressed, Arya's influence at Westfield continued to expand. She joined the debate team, where her ability to process and counter arguments in real time made her a formidable opponent. She tutored struggling students in mathematics and literature, developing adaptive teaching methods that helped various learning styles. Master Kim visited the school to give a demonstration at Arya's request. The assembly was mandatory, and many students expected a typical martial arts display. Instead, Master Kim spoke about perception, adaptation, and the strength found in supposed weakness. He brought Arya on stage for a demonstration, not of combat, but of awareness. With her permission, he had various volunteers attempt to approach her silently from different angles. Each time, she identified their position and approach without fail, explaining the subtle cues that had given them away. Miss Chen has learned to perceive the world in ways most of you cannot imagine, Master Kim explained. Where you rely on a single dominant sense, she uses all available information. This is not disability, it is enhanced ability. The demonstration culminated with a sparring session between Arya and Master Kim. It was choreographed for safety, but performed at full speed, showcasing the fluid grace and precision of their movements. The sight of Arya matching her elderly master, move for move, neither able to see the other, left the audience speechless. Afterward, Principal Victoria Hawthorne announced the creation of an adaptive martial arts program at Westfield to be taught by Master Kim's senior students with Arya as a peer advisor. The program would be open to all students, with special emphasis on those with various disabilities. Marcus was one of the first to sign up. "Why?" Arya asked him after class. "Because I want to understand," he replied. "How you do what you do. How you see without seeing. How you stayed so calm when we were such assholes to you." "It's not just about the physical training," Arya warned. "Master Kim teaches philosophy, mental discipline, emotional control. It might challenge some of your assumptions." "Good," Marcus said firmly. "My assumptions need challenging." The program was a success beyond anyone's expectations. Students with and without disabilities trained together, learning not just self-defense, but also empathy, patience, and new ways of perceiving the world. Marcus, surprisingly, showed genuine aptitude and dedication, arriving early for sessions and staying late to practice. His transformation didn't go unnoticed at home. Richard Sterling summoned Arya to his office one afternoon, a request that was technically optional, but practically mandatory given his position on the school board. The Sterling Enterprises building was all glass and steel, a monument to wealth and power. Arya navigated it with her usual confidence, though she was aware of the whispers and stares from employees who wondered what a blind teenager was doing there. Richard Sterling's office smelled of leather, expensive wood, and the faint aroma of cigar smoke. He didn't offer her a seat initially, a power play that might have worked on someone who relied on visual cues. "Please sit," he said finally, when she remained standing calmly. Arya located the chair by sound and sat gracefully. "You wanted to see me, Mr. Sterling. You've had quite an influence on my son," he began without preamble. "Marcus is capable of making his own choices," Arya replied. "Is he? Or have you manipulated him somehow? This complete personality change, this sudden interest in martial arts and philosophy. It's not the son I raised." "Perhaps that's the point," Arya suggested carefully. "Perhaps Marcus is discovering who he is apart from who he was raised to be." Richard Sterling's chair creaked as he leaned back. "You're very articulate for someone of your background." "My background of being blind, or my background of being middle class?" Arya asked mildly. "I'm curious which prejudice you're expressing." The silence that followed was heavy with tension. Then, unexpectedly, Richard Sterling laughed, a short, sharp sound. "You're not intimidated by me at all, are you?" "Should I be? You have power and money, but those things don't define worth. Marcus is learning that. Maybe you could too. You think you understand my son better than I do. I think I see him differently than you do. You see what you want him to be. I see who he is." Richard was quiet for a long moment. "He wants to teach," he said finally. "He told me he wants to pursue education instead of business. And it's impractical. Foolish, a waste of his potential." "Is it?" A good teacher shapes hundreds of minds over a career. They create ripples that extend far beyond what any business deal could achieve. Marcus has the potential to inspire students the way he's been inspired. That's not waste. That's legacy. You really believe that? I've seen what good teachers can do. Dr. Harrison changed my life by treating me as a scholar first and a blind person second. Master Kim taught me that perceived limitations are often just opportunities for innovation. Marcus could be that kind of teacher. Richard Sterling stood and walked to the window, his footsteps heavy on the thick carpet. You've given me much to think about, Miss Chen. You're not what I expected. People rarely are when you really see them, Arya replied. As she left the building, Arya reflected on how much had changed since that first day at Westfield. The school that had seemed so hostile and challenging had become a place of growth and unexpected connections. Marcus, who had been her tormentor, was becoming something approaching a friend. The students who had watched her harassment in silence were now advocates for inclusion and understanding. The year progressed with continued positive changes. Arya was elected to student government, her campaign focusing on accessibility and inclusion winning broad support. She helped establish a peer mentoring program that paired students with various challenges with supportive classmates. The adaptive martial arts program expanded to include meditation and mindfulness training. Marcus's relationship with his father remained strained, but was slowly improving. Richard Sterling attended one of the martial arts demonstrations and watched his son help teach basic techniques to younger students with patience and enthusiasm. Afterward, he told Marcus he was proud of him, words that Marcus later admitted he had never heard before. Spring arrived with the announcement of college acceptances. Arya had been accepted to multiple prestigious universities with full scholarships, her unique story and exceptional academics making her a highly sought-after candidate. She chose Yale, drawn by their strong disability services and innovative literature program. Marcus, defying his father's expectations but with his grudging support, accepted a position at Columbia's Teachers College. He planned to study education with a focus on inclusive teaching methods, inspired by his experiences with Arya and Master Kim. Elena was headed to Northwestern for journalism, while David had been recruited by MIT for their computer science program with a focus on accessibility technology. The graduation ceremony was held on a perfect June day. Arya had been selected as valedictorian, her speech focusing on the theme of seeing beyond sight. As she stood at the podium, her white cane resting against it, she thought about the journey that had brought her here. When I arrived at Westfield, she began, her voice clear and strong, I was seen as different, disabled, limited. Some saw me as a target, others as an inspiration, but few saw me as simply Arya. This year has been about changing perceptions, not just how others see me, but how we all see each other. She spoke about the danger of assumptions, the power of empathy, and the strength found in vulnerability. She thanked her teachers, her friends, and even without naming him directly, Marcus, for teaching her that people are capable of profound change. We leave here different than we arrived, she concluded. We've learned that true vision has nothing to do with eyes and everything to do with understanding. We've discovered that strength comes in many forms, that courage can be quiet, and that the most important battles are often fought within ourselves. As we go forward, I challenge each of you to see beyond the surface, to question your assumptions, and to recognize the extraordinary in what others might dismiss as ordinary. The applause was thunderous and sustained. As Arya made her way back to her seat, she felt hands reaching out to touch her shoulder, offer congratulations, express support. Among them was Marcus, who squeezed her hand briefly and whispered, "Thank you." After the ceremony, as families gathered for photographs and celebrations, Master Kim approached Arya with a small, wrapped package. A graduation gift, he said simply. Inside was a simple black belt, but with her name embroidered in both English and Korean, along with a phrase she recognized: "True sight comes from within." "You've earned this many times over," Master Kim said, "not just through your physical training, but through your wisdom, patience, and ability to transform conflict into understanding. You are a true warrior, Arya Chen." As the day wound down and families began to leave, Arya stood with Elena and David, their voices mixing with the general celebration around them. Marcus approached with his parents, his mother graciously congratulating all of them, while Richard Sterling maintained his characteristic reserve. "Miss Chen," Richard said formally, "I owe you an apology, and my thanks. You've helped my son become someone I didn't know he could be." "He was always that person," Arya replied. "He just needed permission to show it." Richard nodded slowly. "Perhaps we all need that permission sometimes." As the Sterling family walked away, Marcus turned back briefly. "See you round, Chen," he called out. "Not if I see you first," she replied, the old joke landing differently now, wrapped in genuine warmth rather than defensive humor. The summer passed quickly, filled with preparation for college and continued training with Master Kim. Arya helped teach at his dojo, working with young students who were just beginning to understand that blindness didn't mean helplessness. One afternoon, a new student arrived. A young girl, maybe 11, recently blinded in an accident. She was angry, frightened, and resistant to any attempts at help. Her parents looked exhausted and desperate. "I don't want to learn stupid martial arts," the girl said sullenly. "I can't do anything anymore." Arya knelt beside her, remembering her own anger and fear from years before. "What's your name?" "Sophie," the girl muttered. "Sophie, I know exactly how you feel," Arya said gently. "I was 10 when I lost my sight. I thought my life was over. I was wrong. Easy for you to say. You've had time to get used to it." "Time helps," Arya admitted. "But what helped more was learning that blindness isn't about what you can't do. It's about discovering new ways to do everything. Would you like me to show you something?" With Sophie's reluctant agreement, Arya demonstrated some basic spatial awareness exercises, teaching her to use sound and air movement to navigate. Within an hour, Sophie was successfully identifying the positions of people around her, a small smile beginning to appear on her face. "How do you do that?" Sophie asked, amazement creeping into her voice. "Practice, training, and the belief that you're capable of more than you think. Master Kim taught me that, and now I can teach you if you're willing to learn." Sophie's parents looked near tears as their daughter agreed to try. It was a beginning, Arya knew, just as her first day with Master Kim had been a beginning. Before leaving for Yale, Arya received an unexpected message from Tyler Morrison. He had spent the summer volunteering at a camp for visually impaired children, inspired by her story and seeking to make amends for his past behavior. He wanted her to know that the experience had changed his perspective entirely. Connor Blake had taken a different path, starting a fundraising campaign for adaptive technology in schools. He raised thousands of dollars and established a scholarship fund for students with disabilities to attend Westfield. The night before her departure for college, Arya sat with her family at dinner. Michael, now 13 and starting high school himself, was full of questions about college life. Her parents alternated between pride and worry, natural emotions for parents sending their blind daughter to navigate a new environment independently. "You'll call if you need anything," her mother said for the 10th time. "I'll be fine, Mom. I've got this." Her father, ever practical, had a different concern. "Have you decided whether to continue hiding your martial arts training?" Arya considered this. "I think I'll be more open about it. Not advertising, but not hiding either. Westfield taught me that being fully myself is better than maintaining a secret." "Good," her father said simply. "Secrets are heavy burdens." The next morning, as her parents drove her to Yale, Arya thought about the events of the past year. She had entered Westfield as a transfer student seeking education and had left as a catalyst for change. She had faced bullying and harassment, but had transformed her tormentors into allies. She had hidden her strength until revealing it became necessary, and in doing so, had shown others their own hidden strengths. The dormitory at Yale was buzzing with activity as new students arrived. Aria's roommate, a cheerful girl from California named Jessica, was immediately curious about the cane and dark glasses, but refreshingly direct in her questions. "So, like, how do you read textbooks?" Jessica asked. "Digital versions with screen readers, braille displays, audiobooks," Aria explained. "Technology has made education much more accessible." "That's so cool. And you do martial arts? That's badass." Aria smiled. "I do. It's been a big part of my life." As she unpacked her belongings, including the black belt from Master Kim that would hang in a place of honor, Aria reflected on the journey that had brought her here. Each challenge had been an opportunity for growth, each conflict a chance for understanding. Her phone buzzed with a text from Elena. "Missing you already! Destroy them at Yale!" Then David, "Set up accessibility software on your laptop." "You're welcome." And surprisingly, Marcus, "First day of teacher training. Thinking about what you said about seeing students clearly. Thank you for seeing me." Aria smiled, typing back responses to each. The network of relationships she had built at Westfield would endure, strengthened by shared experiences and mutual growth. That evening at the freshman orientation meeting, the discussion turned to challenges and overcoming adversity. When invited to share, Aria stood, her cane marking a steady rhythm as she moved to the front. "Blindness isn't my disability," she began. "It's my different ability. It's taught me to perceive the world in ways that go beyond sight. It's shown me that the greatest barriers aren't physical, but are the assumptions we make about ourselves and others." She told them about Westfield, about facing harassment and choosing patience over retaliation, about transforming bullies into allies through understanding rather than force, about the power of being seen for who you truly are, rather than what others expect you to be. "My martial arts master once told me that true strength isn't in the fist, but in the mind and heart," she concluded. "That true victory comes not from defeating others, but from helping them discover their better selves. That's the lesson I bring from Westfield, and it's the approach I plan to take here at Yale." The response was warm and appreciative, with several students approaching her afterward to share their own stories of overcoming challenges. Among them was a young man with a prosthetic leg who wanted to learn more about adaptive martial arts, and a girl with severe dyslexia who was interested in alternative learning strategies. As Aria made her way back to her dorm, navigating the unfamiliar paths that would soon become routine, she thought about Master Kim's words from years ago. "Your blindness is not a limitation to overcome, but a gift to be developed." At Westfield, she had developed that gift, using it to change not just her own life, but the lives of those around her. Marcus had discovered his authentic self beyond his father's expectations. Eleanor had found her voice as an advocate for justice. David had channeled his technical skills toward accessibility innovation. Even Connor and Tyler had begun journeys toward becoming better people. The white cane continued its rhythmic tap against the pavement, but its sound had evolved in meaning. Once a symbol of limitation in others' eyes, it had become an instrument of navigation, a tool of independence, and ultimately a conductor's baton orchestrating change wherever she went. As she entered her dorm room, Jessica looked up from her unpacking. "How was the orientation?" "Illuminating," Aria replied with a smile. "Ha ha, I see what you did there." "Actually," Aria laughed, "you see what I did there. I just did it." It was a small joke, the kind she had learned to make to put others at ease about her blindness. But it also represented something larger, The ability to find humor in difference, to bridge gaps with laughter, to transform potential awkwardness into connection. Over the following weeks at Yale, Aria established herself much as she had at Westfield, but with the confidence of experience. She joined the debate team immediately, her reputation from high school competitions preceding her. She found the Disability Services office and offered to help mentor other students with visual impairments. She located a local martial arts dojo where she could continue her training and potentially teach. The academic work was challenging but exhilarating. Her literature professors were impressed by her analytical skills and unique perspectives. In a seminar on narrative voice, she wrote a paper about the reliability of sensory perception in fiction that her professor called groundbreaking and encouraged her to develop for publication. Meanwhile, reports filtered in from her Westfield friends. Elena had joined the Northwestern newspaper and was already making waves with investigative pieces on campus accessibility. David had developed an app that used AI to provide real-time audio descriptions of surroundings for visually impaired users. Marcus sent regular updates about his education classes, sharing his excitement about innovative teaching methods and his growing confidence in his chosen path. One evening, Aria received an unexpected call from Principal Hawthorne at Westfield. The adaptive martial arts program had been such a success that they were expanding it to other schools in the district. Would Aria be willing to return during winter break to help train new instructors? Of course, Aria agreed immediately. It would be an honor. There's something else, Principal Hawthorne continued. Marcus Sterling has been volunteering as an assistant instructor. He's shown remarkable dedication and skill. He specifically requested that you know about his involvement. After the call, Aria sat quietly in her room, processing this information. Marcus's transformation from bully to advocate was complete, it seemed. The boy who had once tried to humiliate her for her blindness was now teaching others to see beyond physical limitations. She thought about the ripple effects of that year at Westfield, her refusal to be victimized, her patience in the face of harassment, her willingness to see humanity in her tormentors. All of it had created waves of change that continued to spread. Her phone rang again. It was Master Kim. "I heard about the Westfield program expansion," he said without preamble. "You should know that Marcus Sterling has been training at my dojo on weekends. He drives 2 hours each way to attend sessions." "Really?" Aria was genuinely surprised. "He's quite dedicated. He told me he wants to understand what you understood, to see what you see." I told him that's impossible. He can never see what you see because he has not lived your experience, but he can learn to see differently than he did before. That's all any of us can do. "What do you think of him?" Aria asked. "I think," Master Kim said slowly, "that he represents the best possible outcome of conflict, transformation rather than destruction. You didn't defeat him, Aria. You redeemed him. That's far more difficult and far more valuable." Winter break arrived more quickly than expected. Aria returned home to find her family eager to hear about her college experiences. Michael had grown several inches and was full of teenage swagger that reminded her painfully of early Marcus. "There's this kid at school," Michael mentioned during dinner. "He keeps picking on the special education students. Makes fun of them, trips them, stuff like that." "What do you do about it?" Aria asked. "Nothing. It's not my problem." Aria set down her fork. "Michael, everything I went through at Westfield started because people thought it wasn't their problem. Silence in the face of cruelty is complicity. But if I say something, he'll target me. Maybe. Or maybe he'll realize his behavior has consequences. Either way, you'll know you did the right thing." Michael was quiet for a moment. "What would you do?" I'd start by documenting the behavior. Then I'd report it to teachers and administrators. If that didn't work, I'd rally other students to stand with the victims. And if absolutely necessary, I'd stand between the bully and their target, even if it meant becoming a target myself. You make it sound easy. It's not easy, Arya admitted. It's scary and difficult and sometimes dangerous, but it's necessary. We become the world we're willing to accept. If we accept cruelty, we create a cruel world. If we demand kindness, we create a kind world. The next day, Arya returned to Westfield for the instructor training program. The campus felt both familiar and foreign, filled with memories but no longer her daily reality. She made her way to the gymnasium where the training would take place, her cane tapping against floors she could navigate from memory. "Arya!" Eleanor's voice called out. She had also returned for winter break and came to watch the training. "You look so collegiate." They embraced, and Arya felt the warmth of genuine friendship. David was there too, setting up recording equipment to document the training for future reference. And then there was Marcus. He stood with the other volunteer instructors, wearing a traditional GI with a brown belt, an impressive advancement for less than a year of training. When he heard her arrive, he approached with footsteps she would have recognized anywhere. "Chen," he said, and she could hear the smile in his voice. "Sterling," she replied with matching warmth. "Brown belt already." "Master Kim is a demanding teacher. But you know that." He paused. "Thank you for coming back to help with this." "Thank you for continuing it," Arya responded. "I heard you've been dedicated to the program." "It's important," Marcus said simply. "What we teach here, it's not just about fighting. It's about understanding, empathy, seeing beyond surface differences. Things I should have known before but didn't." The training session brought together potential instructors from 5 different schools. Arya demonstrated adaptive techniques while Marcus assisted, their partnership smooth and natural. They showed how traditional martial arts could be modified for various disabilities, how strength could be found in different forms, how limitation could become advantage. During a break, Connor Blake arrived. He had also returned from college and wanted to observe the training. His interaction with Arya was still somewhat awkward, the ghost of their past hanging between them. "I've been thinking," he said hesitantly, "about everything that happened. I was a coward. I went along with Marcus because it was easier than standing up to him. I'm sorry." "Apologies are good," Arya replied, "but actions are better." "What are you doing now to be different?" Connor straightened slightly. "I'm majoring in special education. I want to work with kids with disabilities, maybe make up for before." "That's a good start," Arya acknowledged. "The best apology is change behavior." The training continued for 3 days, with Arya and Marcus working as an effective team. They demonstrated sparring techniques, with Arya showing how she tracked movement without sight, while Marcus explained the visual cues that sighted fighters relied on too heavily. On the last evening, Master Kim held a special session for advanced students. Arya and Marcus were paired for a demonstration match, not choreographed, but not full contact either. It was meant to show the flow and philosophy of adaptive martial arts. As they faced each other on the mat, Arya remembered their confrontation at Pine Ridge. Then Marcus had been an aggressor, and she had been defending herself. Now they were partners in a dance of mutual respect and understanding. The match was beautiful in its way. Marcus had learned not to rely solely on visual deception, while Arya demonstrated the full range of her abilities openly for the first time at Westfield. They moved in harmony, attack flowing into defense and back again, neither dominant nor submissive, but balanced. When they finished, the audience was silent for a moment before erupting in applause. Master Kim nodded his approval, a rare sign of satisfaction from the demanding teacher. "This," he announced to the assembled students, is what we strive for. Not victory over others, but harmony with them. Not the defeat of opponents, but the transformation of conflict into understanding. After the session, as people were leaving, Richard Sterling appeared. He had been watching from the back, unnoticed until now. He approached Arya and Marcus, his expression unreadable. "That was educational," he said carefully. "Did you learn something?" Marcus asked, a slight challenge in his voice. Richard looked at his son, then at Arya. "I learned that I've been blind in my own way. Blind to possibilities, to different forms of strength, to who my son really is, versus who I wanted him to be." It was the closest to an admission of error that Richard Sterling had probably ever made. Marcus seemed stunned, but Arya understood the significance of the moment. "Blindness comes in many forms," she said gently. "The good news is that most of them are curable if we're willing to see differently." Richard nodded slowly, then did something unexpected. He bowed slightly to Master Kim, a gesture of respect that acknowledged the Master's teaching and influence. As winter break ended and Arya prepared to return to Yale, she reflected on the visit home. The program at Westfield would continue to grow, spreading its philosophy of adaptive strength and inclusive teaching. Marcus would return to Columbia with renewed purpose in his education studies. Connor would continue his journey toward redemption through service, and perhaps even Richard Sterling would begin to see the world through less rigid eyes. Back at Yale for spring semester, Arya threw herself into her studies with renewed energy. She began working on a book proposal about her experiences, encouraged by a professor who saw publishing potential in her story. The narrative would focus not on overcoming disability, but on transforming perception. How blindness had given her different sight, how conflict had created unexpected connections, how apparent weakness had revealed hidden strength. She also started a campus organization called Beyond Sight, bringing together students with various disabilities to share experiences and advocate for better accessibility. The group grew quickly, attracting not just disabled students, but allies who wanted to learn and help. One evening, while working on her book proposal, Arya received a video message from Michael. He had confronted the bully at his school, standing up for a student with Down syndrome who was being harassed. The bully had backed down when faced with real opposition, and other students had joined Michael in protecting the vulnerable student. "You were right," Michael said in the message. "It was scary, but it was necessary." "The kid I defended, his name is Tommy. He hugged me afterward, said I was his hero. But really, you're mine. You taught me that standing up for others is what makes us human." Arya smiled, tears forming behind her dark glasses. The ripples continued to spread, each act of courage inspiring another, each transformation leading to more transformation. As the semester progressed, she received regular updates from various people whose lives had intersected with hers at Westfield. Elena had exposed discrimination in Northwestern's admission policies through investigative journalism. David's accessibility app had been downloaded thousands of times and was helping visually impaired people navigate the world more independently. Marcus had started a teaching blog about inclusive education that was gaining attention from progressive educators. Even Tyler Morrison, the most reluctant of Marcus's former crew, had found his own path to redemption. He had become an advocate for disability rights at his college, sharing his story of transformation and the lessons learned from his shameful behavior at Westfield. Spring arrived at Yale with its usual burst of activity and stress. Finals approached, and Arya balanced her academic work with her advocacy efforts and martial arts training. She had found a balance between revealing and concealing her abilities, no longer hiding but not performing either. One day, she received an unexpected call from a publisher interested in her book proposal. They wanted to meet, to discuss the possibility of publication. It was an opportunity she had dreamed of but hadn't expected so soon. The meeting went well. The publisher was impressed not just by her story, but by her philosophical approach to blindness and conflict. They saw potential for the book to reach beyond the disability community to anyone who had faced adversity or sought to understand difference. "Your story isn't just about being blind," the editor said. "It's about seeing clearly, about recognizing humanity in others, even when they fail to see it in themselves. That's a universal message." As freshman year drew to a close, Arya stood at another graduation, not her own this time, but watching Master Kim award black belts to students who had completed their first year of training in the adaptive program. Marcus was among them, having dedicated himself fully to the art. Watching him bow to Master Kim and receive his belt, Arya remembered the arrogant boy who had tried to humiliate her on her first day at Westfield. The transformation was complete, not just in his behavior, but in his fundamental understanding of strength, respect, and human dignity. After the ceremony, Marcus approached her. "I've been accepted to a summer program," he said, "teaching martial arts to kids with disabilities at a camp in Colorado. It's volunteer, no pay, but it's exactly what you should be doing," Arya finished for him. "Yeah, I wanted to thank you again, for seeing past what I was to what I could be, for having the patience to let me figure it out instead of just writing me off. Everyone deserves the chance to become better," Arya said. "You just needed to see that chance." As she prepared to return to Yale for sophomore year, Arya thought about the journey that had brought her here. The frightened 10-year-old girl who had thought blindness meant the end of her world had become a young woman who saw possibilities where others saw limitations. The rhythmic tap of her white cane continued its steady beat, but now it was joined by other sounds, the footsteps of friends who walked beside her, the voices of those she had inspired, the echo of change rippling outward from every interaction. Master Kim had been right all those years ago. Blindness wasn't her disability, it was her different ability. It had taught her to perceive what others missed, to find strength in unexpected places, to transform conflict into connection. As she packed for her return to Yale, Arya carefully folded the GI that Master Kim had given her, running her fingers over the embroidered words. "True sight comes from within." It was a reminder that vision had nothing to do with eyes and everything to do with understanding. Her phone buzzed with messages from her expanding network of friends and allies. Elena sharing her latest investigative triumph. David announcing a breakthrough in his accessibility technology. Marcus describing a breakthrough with a struggling student. Each message was a testament to the power of transformation, the possibility of growth, the impact one person could have by refusing to be limited by others' perceptions. The story of Arya Chen would continue beyond Westfield, beyond Yale, beyond any single institution or moment. It would continue in every person who learned to see beyond surface differences, who chose understanding over assumption, who recognized that true strength came not from dominating others, but from lifting them up. As she stood at the threshold of her sophomore year, Arya knew that challenges lay ahead. There would be more people who saw only her blindness, more obstacles to navigate, more battles to fight or avoid. But she also knew that she carried with her the lessons of Westfield, that patience could transform aggression, that empathy could bridge any divide, and that the most profound victories were won not through force, but through the quiet strength of refusing to be anything less than fully herself. The white cane would continue its rhythmic tap, marking her path through the world, but it was no longer just a tool for navigation. It had become a symbol of determination, a banner of independence, and a reminder to everyone who heard its steady beat that disability was not limitation but simply difference, and that in that difference lay extraordinary strength. The sound echoed through the halls of memory and possibility, a steady rhythm that said, "I am here, I am capable, I am unbroken, and I see more clearly than you might imagine, even in the darkness that has become my light."